Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with Peter Scalzo and his journal, because that's what we're doing right now. It's your journal, right? And
Yes.
there's your journey through the wall. So it's that journal going back in time. How does it feel as we go through this journal?
Painful yet cathartic.
Cathartic. Wow. You had to use the
I did. I wanted to use that word.
I bet you did, because we were just over there
Yeah.
asking ChatGPT to review some of our podcasts and to give quotes.
Yeah.
And you wanted it to pull out cathartic, didn't you?
I did.
Peter,
But it does describe there's a process of healing, I think, to go revisit some of the details. Painful and difficult to do, hard for me to do emotionally, but also beneficial. And I think settles some things in my life. That's how I feel.
How many times have you reviewed it?
At this depth?
Yeah. So this is something that you're exploring, and there's areas that you're exploring for the first time by
Yeah.
rereading this.
Yeah, I would read my journal.
Yeah.
I've done that many times, but you had me recall smells and details, people that were there and people who weren't there and all that. So that's unique for me. It's new.
I would bet that we have listeners who both journal and don't journal. And so, and I like to journal also, but it's not every day I journal my day out. It's when big things are going on, I like to write down those thoughts. And it's always interesting to go back and reread some of those entries and to think about and to experience thoughts and feelings related to those. And so I'm guessing you've had that experience many
Yes.
times too from your own journaling.
Yeah, because reading through some of these words, I remember exactly what I was feeling when I wrote it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this isn't a podcast about journaling though. And so, and that's not the point. Is we're actually, I think it's a really important tool. We would encourage people in recovery to use journals a lot. We're actually wanting to explore right now the journey through the wall, and a journal is a great tool to have in the midst of that.
Yeah.
And so, but it wasn't your initial plan was to use a journal to journey through the wall. When the wall came, God brought that journal via Johnny D, put it on your chest. It sat dormant for several days, 7 or 8 days. I think
No,
you talked
like
about
around 4 days.
4 days. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I got my days mixed up
That's
already.
okay.
That's going to come out as a dumb quote when we ask Jack to do that, right?
Maybe.
And then you started, and we leaned into the first page last week, and you quoted some stuff that was interesting about your journey. It really expressed your heart in a big way.
Yeah.
And we wanted to turn the page and go a little bit deeper or a little further on. And so let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think the next, as I faced this wall and began to step into this wall, the second day, so 11/2/15, November 2nd was the first day of this actual surgery. The next day I wrote, one day at a time, one moment at a time. But I don't know if I can do this. I told Jesus, I can't do this anymore. Take me now. I am so tired of cancer doctors and hospitals, 14 surgeries, so many nights. And then I entered into a little discussion about death after that. And it went something like this. Lord, I know that death equals peace and union with you. I had that understanding, but it also means separation from my family. I need to trust in you. This is so hard, in fact, impossible for me to do. I feel so weak. Help me. Then I turned to my children who were there with me. I said, Paul with me for 4 nights and Chelsea for 4 nights. I would be so lonely without them. I would hate this. Thank you for these children. You have made them wonderful. I am overwhelmed and undone. I can't cope without you. Help me, Lord, to trust in you. So those were, God, Jesus being a reality in my life, wailing on him at first, and then turning to the only anchor that I really knew, which was him, looking for some security, stability, some peace, some hope in that anchor, and struggling to find that place of being able to put both feet in the hope camp. I wasn't there.
Yeah, we've done a podcast on eternity and heaven in the past, and so I see that you have notes of that in this expression here. I thought your starting point was interesting. Why did you start there? Reread it if you don't
You
mind.
mean the one day at a time, one moment at a time?
Yep, and go a little further.
I don't know if I can do this. I told Jesus, I can't do this anymore. Take me now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you start out with one day at a time, and I don't know what is making you say it that way.
At this point, I had had some recovery and knew that part of the serenity prayer is about living one day at a time, one moment at a time. So I think there was something in me. I believe the Lord that was beginning to build in me. Let's chip away at this one piece at a time. Let's not try to take the whole wall on, the whole mountain. Let's just take a step onto the base of the mountain. You know what I mean? And for me, taking the first step was to say, I hate this. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I mean, I said, take me now a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to go through the wall. I wanted to avoid the wall.
Yeah, and the wall represented pain, suffering, tiredness.
Yeah, and death.
Yeah, but you described death as peace.
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
Yeah. The wall represents actually not death, I think.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
wall represented suffering this side of eternity.
Yeah, let me just read this one.
Yeah.
So a priest came and anointed me with oil, and it was at 5:45 in the morning, a good friend of mine. And I put down at 6:30 a.m., so it's 5:45 becomes 6:30 a.m., I wrote, my body is completely broken and crushed. I put the medical community encircles me with constant interruptions, probing, needles, medicine. I put down the greatest enemy is fear of the future due to the cancer.
Could you describe that fear a little more? Because it doesn't sound like fear of death.
Well, it was certainly, I was totally unprepared for where this journey went. I had not considered any of these thoughts. I thought a simple surgical remedy, and then we were going to move on with life like we had in the past. Mm-hmm. So I think it was, how am I going to do an end-of-life process? How am I going to prepare my kids for this? How am I going to provide for them? You know, I think the actual passing, like, of death itself, I mean, I was scared of the process leading up to that more.
Yeah.
It was more the pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by that you didn't feel prepared.
Yeah, not at all.
For the other pieces of that.
I mean, I'm 40. Well, how old was I at this point? 50? 52, 53, around there. I'm trying to remember. Mm-hmm. 53. And, you know, I still felt like I had a whole life ahead of me. My kids are depending on me, 6 children and wife and all that stuff. I was an active guy, enjoyed life. It was over. That's what I thought.
You know, the expressions in here, did that do anything for you to write that down? When you did that, can you remember how you felt after you wrote those down? What did that do for you?
Well, like a release. It's like, I got this out. Like it's mulling around inside of me, and now it's out. And I was like, oh man, this is, even though it was hard to look at, it was like, wow, this is just great to get it out.
This is really, that last piece is really fascinating to me because, we talk a lot about the journey to the wall. And so this idea of being honest was one of the first more important steps of going through the wall, is that, and when you finally got honest, it was a great relief. And it wasn't honest about sinfulness. It was honest about your actual feelings and where you were at. So that must be an important part of this journey through the wall, is getting to a point of honest expression of something that maybe in one sense you've been hiding from yourself or others, that you put on paper. And do you think you would have ever been that honest without this experience?
No way. Not about that. And I think in the evangelical space, we want to put spins on it right away. And I think you mentioned this during our last podcast episode, but sort of, oh, God's got this kind of thing right away and I marvel at Jesus, who was facing an unbelievable wall called the crucifixion, even though he knew resurrection would come. And he felt the feelings. He was in agony. He was, you can tell there was all these tough emotions wrapped up into him. And, some of the writers said he was like sweating drops of blood kind of thing, but he was in agony. And I think he got to the point where he said, I don't want this. I mean, Jesus said that.
He was honest.
Yeah.
He didn't want to go through the pain either. So
no.
Being honest is not a problem. It's actually a part of the journey of healing for you, for us. Jesus didn't need to be healed, but it was part of his journey of love, I think. I want to talk about for a second, you would ask that no visitors, and you kind of maintained that, but your kids, you mentioned two of them that were there for multiple nights.
Yeah.
What was different about them and can you describe your feelings towards them versus other people and the why?
Having my children there, first of all, they're not fixers, and to me, they're very life-giving. They're easy people to be with, and we're just sort of living their lives next to me. Like they would have their laptops, they would be doing, I forget where they were in the process of their schooling and all that, but they would do their life next to me. And they weren't like focused on me. Like I didn't want people coming into my room just staring at me, standing over me and saying things like, God's got this kind of thing. I wasn't ready for that and didn't want it.
Do you think they had an understanding or a fear of your death?
Yeah.
And how did that get expressed?
I don't know. I think that they...
you didn't feel that fear from them because they were safe.
Yeah. Right.
But you think they had it still?
Because they were in ICU with me. They knew what this situation was. In fact, Chelsea was with me in 2017 when Grasso, my oncologist and fellow, came in and said, "That's it, we're done. Go on disability, call hospice." Sloan had advised that. So, yeah, she was with me. I don't know, there was a sense of, with them, that, this news is not going to crash us. We're just going to continue and support you in this process.
If I were to put the word presence is the most important gift they could give, is that what you would?
Absolutely. Because I remember...
Because you said no fixing a second ago. They weren't going to fix,
right,
but they were there.
I remember specifically the TV was on, my laptop was there, and I think it was Chelsea. She was in the lazy boy chair that they have, next to the bed, and she was on her laptop, and we weren't saying anything, but I had this feeling of warmth, like it's almost like we're back at home together and we're just with each other.
That's the question I was getting ready to ask.
Yeah.
What I was still trying to understand the why, because you had basically said nobody here. And what about these two individuals or your kids in general? Because I think you had accepted all of them to be there, was okay. And was it that it was just a sense of warmth that they represented something that's
Family.
a sense of
Part of me.
part of you?
Yeah, it was different. Yeah.
And what is that difference? What, like when you say warmth, what did you
Yeah.
actually feel?
We loved each other, accepted each other, no matter what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I have a good relationship with my kids. So it was this acceptance of, and not having to fix or perform or do anything, just be present.
Yeah, and some people maybe, if they're listening to this, are going, "Of course,
Yeah.
that's the way." And my reason for asking is, it's not. Of course, there are many families where it's not this way. That the family closeness is not there. Even with your own kids, there's a level of distance and lack of acceptance. And so I'm exploring it because there's a bond that's there. And I've been really wrestling with this idea a bit about presence and really wanting to understand presence as maybe the highest form of love, one of the highest form, not the, but one of the highest forms of love that you can give is presence. And I was thinking about whenever I want to show disdain to somebody, one of the ways that I do that is by removing my presence.
Right.
I did this with my own family. It's like, hey, when I felt disdainful, I'm just like, I just am not going to engage. I'm going to pull my presence away from you. And so you described not words from your kids, you described them just presence, and then you described warmth. That their presence brought warmth.
Right.
And warmth where? Is I'll question again, just to explore one more level, is that how did that warmth feel? Where did it feel from?
In my core, inside, kind of like it's Christmas time and there's a batch of cookies that were just made, and I get to eat some of those cookies in a fest, in a kind of a happy environment, eating those cookies. That kind of a feeling.
And that got you to a point where you could, because the end of that day's journal, you described that warmth in a level of detail that was really a level of moving from it's hopeless to an expression of thankfulness for that little bit of light that I think you describe now as warmth. Yeah. It's not what you put in your journal, but you described thankfulness for them.
Yeah.
Would you reread that section in just a second, that thankfulness that you described?
Oh, I put down Paul with me for 4 nights, Chelsea for 4 nights. I would be so lonely without them. I would hate this. Thank you for these children. You have made them wonderful.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so you close out your day with an expression of gratitude.
Yeah.
And we've talked on this podcast a few times how the feeling of gratitude cannot be experienced with the feeling of depression at the exact same time. Mm-hmm. And yet I think you were at your probably greatest depressed moment. And so I just want to touch on this for a second, because your initial reaction to this diagnosis, to this dark night, was everyone out.
Right.
And yet there was a sliver of light that you put into your journal, and that came from your family. And it didn't come from fixing, it came from presence. You described it as warmth, and now your expression back was gratitude. man, it just seems like it really highlights
Mm.
some path about how we journey through the wall, and it cannot be done alone.
Right.
If you were to be there by yourself, could you stop for a second, because you
Yeah.
said it in there?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if you were there absolutely alone?
Mm-hmm.
What would it have been like?
I think that for me, it would have been a long journey, longer journey to that the loneliness. I did feel lonely,
Mm-hmm.
but the loneliness I felt was mitigated, lessened by my children being there. So yeah, I mean it was huge. In fact, my children never missed a hospital stay after that, except maybe just a few times where I didn't have these like life-threatening surgeries going on. But they've always been there. I mean, we also have some funny stories too. I remember being at Lenox Hill in the telemetry unit where they are monitoring your heart 24/7, and in a New York City, Manhattan hospital, the rooms are small, at least at Lenox Hill. Sloan, they're a little bit bigger, and just close to my roommate, a little curtain separating us, and he had a full-blown heart attack at like 3 a.m. All the lights went on, the paddles and everything, and I had on my AirPods, everything, nothing. I was like traumatized. My eyes were wide open, and I was like, "This is unbelievable." And finally, they got him stabilized. Brought him to wherever they brought him, then brought him back. And at 6:30, my daughter woke up. Chelsea was in there, and she came over smiling and said, "Man, I just had a great night's sleep." She was 4 feet away from this guy with the lights all. And so we just got the biggest kick. I said, "You don't know that my roommate had this huge heart attack?" And she goes, "No."
Wow.
But it was just one of those moments where it's like we shared this, like, I can't believe you slept through that, Chelsea.
Like these experiences that you're talking about are at the core of humanity that
Yeah.
you're describing, that and the humor, the experiencing life together. I think the big takeaway I think that I hear from this page in the journal really is about not doing it alone, and this idea of how the pieces are coming together, but your ability to feel warmth and even one drop of hope and where it came from feels important to this journey, to your journey through the wall.
Yeah.
And if we were to say to our listeners or watchers of this podcast, a high important aspect of your journey must be a connection with others. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from family. It can be from friends. But wherever those important places, one thing I would note that you've just highlighted with this is that not fixers, because fixers will drain you. And so can you describe a fixer so people would know?
I've had a lot of both, but to me, the fixer is saying stuff for them, not me. and it's like draining me of energy, because it's like, well, what am I doing wrong? What are you trying to say to me, kind of thing. And that's how I interpret it. And it's just not helpful for me.
Yes.
So I'm very sensitive to that when I do visitations.
Yeah.
The situation might call for a scripture to be read or something, but I'm super sensitive to that moment of when that should happen.
Yeah. I'll rephrase slightly, because I think I love what you just said, and I think it's worth repeating in this sense. It's like the reason why a fixer isn't great for the situation is because they're actually taking energy from you with their fix. And when they take energy from you when you're at your darkest night, meaning they can't be in that pain.
Right.
And so they actually have to pull from your reserves
Right.
to be able to bear that pain. Man,
Yeah.
what does that do to you? And so,
Yeah.
why there was warmth, you describe your kids coming in and just sitting there, and they didn't try to take something more from you.
Yeah.
Their presence.
Mm-hmm.
Presence by itself was such an expression of love. It gave you energy enough to write that gratitude at the end of your second day of journaling.
Yeah.
What a cool story. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just such a highlighting of how the journey through the wall can look like. And I think all of these journeys are a little different, but your day 2 looked like hopeless, going from hopelessness to an expression of, I can't do this, to an expression of, well, I'll take a baby step. You define the journey as one day at a time, to a recognition of a feeling of there's something warm. You didn't say the word warm, but you described the scenario of having
Yep.
presence.
And I've often said, first of all, I ask myself, am I life-giving right now in this situation? But those people that give life, there are people in my life that are life-giving. And I'd be like, yeah, you can visit. Come on and visit. It's interesting in my journal because then I do turn to God. And what I emphasize about God, and maybe we'll do that next time, is God's love for me. So I turn to this characteristic of God. God is love, but turn to his love in this, which sounds counterintuitive. Like, how can you love me, God, and allow me to go through this? But
I want to juxtapose that at some point in time from your day 1 to that point, because there's a realization that's coming here. And one of the things I liked about this day 2 journal was that it was a moment of getting honest. And then you went from getting honest to, because I asked you, how did you feel when you expressed honestly? And you said there was a release.
Yeah.
And then the moment you were able to get honest, that you didn't have the mask on any longer. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask, does this resonate? You were able to be loved. And the reason why I say that, and this concept was really well discussed in The Cure. As long as we wear a mask, the only thing that can receive love is the mask. Mm-hmm. Because, when there's an expression of love, it's the thing that's being presented. But the moment you take the mask off and you express who and where you really are, then you're open to really receiving love. The real you is at that point in time.
It's such a great point. I mean, and I've been in situations where I know the religious mask is on.
Yeah.
And I'm visiting that person. And inside I'm almost like, well, okay. I mean, not much is going to get done here today. That's how I feel, even though I'm there for the person.
Yes.
But it's like, unless I would much rather have them. I was with one of our cancer support people, and I was just with her, and the doctor came in, and he said, "Can I speak in front of this individual?" And she said, "Yes." And he said, "We're done. There's nothing more we can offer. And now you're going to do an end of life," basically is what he said. And I just held her hand as she wept.
Yeah.
Just holding her hand, didn't say a word. And then she said her husband came in, and they're really close marriage. And I know he would want her to do everything to fight this cancer. And so I said, "You want me to leave?" She said, "No, stay." And she presented him with this scenario. He wept. She wept. And I just sat there holding her hand. So no words.
Presence.
Yeah.
Presence.
That was it. And that was a heavy moment too. Wow.
Yeah. You felt.
Oh.
And what was the feeling you felt?
Sadness, compassion, love.
Yes. All of those at the same time. That's what's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
That just because it's sadness, this moment is so heavy, it's not, it's pain, but it's also love at the same time, which is such a weird, when you start thinking about it, if you can dissect those different components, you got to express and feel love at a really high level at the same time as you were feeling the negative emotions.
And she was a strong believer, had a strong relationship with Jesus. And she said to her husband, "This is what I want. I am ready to transition to be with him." And she was genuine about it. And I was like, wow, talk about acceptance.
Yeah.
I mean, I was blown away by it.
Hmm.
It was such an amazing moment to witness.
And blown away, what did that feel like?
It felt like that this process of suffering and death can be done in such a way that it's actually a beautiful moment. It doesn't have to be this. My life, I've been in such fear of like, what's that moment going to be like? What's it like to die kind of thing? But I've been around so much of it that through this cancer support stuff that I don't have that same fear anymore.
And is it because you got to experience something that maybe has the deepest meaning? You were there with this woman,
Yes.
and she was at the point where she's having to, like, we philosophize and talk about in grandiose terms, but she actually had to practically apply this to her life. And so you were at the point of deep, does my life have purposes? And
Right.
all together, all those things, just like, okay, no, you were there and you experienced her with the expression about something about her deepest meaning, and she's ready. I'm there, and you get to experience it with her. You experience something of the deepest meaning of her life. I don't know, but why is that such a powerful thing?
I felt honored to be invited into that moment.
Because it has such deep meaning.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so too. It's really fascinating when I think about that journey that you were on. You went from anger,
sadness and fear.
Fear, warmth, a glimmer of hope, thankfulness. And we're going to see more as that journey goes on. These are the components of a wall journey that were important for your wall. And I'm not trying to, what I want to be careful about is, as we explore your story, we're not trying to make it the prescription for everyone else.
Yeah,
it's an example of what it means to go through the wall and the tools that were available to you. And not everybody has your supportive family, but I would encourage that you're probably not alone. You probably do have people, and it may be that your journey is about humbly reaching out to that place where there is support and hope and help. But everybody's journey is going to look a little different here. I love this page of your journal, this next step, because it really shows something about what a glimmer of hope means in the midst of that journey to the wall.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
And we get going. We keep going. We're going to go forward some more. But we're out of time for today's podcast.
Yeah.
And
thanks, Sean.
Your journal is amazing. And thank you for sharing it again
thank you.
this week.
Appreciate that.
And join us next time for more Cancer and Peace. And check out resources on cancerandpeace.com. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Blessings.